Well, we are finally here, the finale to Fontaine's Archon quest. This act is now the longest Archon quest after Sumeru's final act, and even though it was this long, I was pretty invested throughout the entire act, being fully engaged in everything from start to finish. Continuing my Archon quest videos, I'm making this right after finishing the quest late into the night, but I want to share my fresh thoughts and review on this really satisfying emotional final act, and of course all the lore that we got. So, here we go. Fontaine Archon Quest Act 5, Masquerade of the Guilty. Which is nice because unlike Sumeru's final act, this one brings back the pattern of following the act names laid out in the Teyvat story trailer. So coming into this, we're supposed to get resolution on the Fontaine prophecy and figure out what the truth is behind the original sin of Fontaine. I thought the setup of the act was really well done because it sets the atmosphere of the tension accurately. After filling out our forms to exit the Fortress of Meropide, which, by the way, I feel like it's funny we kinda just gave up on searching for Childe. Like, we saw the big whale in his dream, and that was kinda it. So I hope he's okay out there in the seawater. Anyways, after filling out forms to exit the Fortress of Meropide, there's a small earthquake on the surface due to a sudden rise in primordial seawater. Even though Neuvillette helped seal the entrance to the primordial seawater, it still manages to rise up in Poisson, where Navia is. After saying bye to Risley and Sijuin, we head to Neuvillette, who tells us about the situation in Poisson. I really like the tension established at Poisson because it shows the severity of the crisis really well. At first it seems like most people were just injured, but actually many of them just dissolved in the seawater, including Navia's two attendants, Belus and Silver. RIP to them, because I feel like they're fan favorites at this point. And it's so clear how devastated and helpless Navia feels, where she's forgetting our conversations and blames herself for initiating the rescue plan in the first place because it cost the lives of Belus and Silver. To us, we just got her drip marketing 2 days ago, where that happy-go-lucky face appearance of hers is completely contrasted with her devastation here. It's very human how Navia feels, because it's so easy for us to blame ourselves for bad things that happen to other people. Navia was in the right to initiate the rescue plan for the people of Poisson, so it makes sense that she feels responsible for their deaths, but at the end of the day, it was both Belus and Silver who chose to risk their own lives to save people. They're both heroes. And while it's completely fine for Navia to take the time to mourn their losses, it's good that she knows to keep moving forward and not let their deaths be in vain. From a narrative point of view, their deaths being permanent and real is what helps establish the threat of this prophecy. It's not a joke, it's serious. And I think the audience in general just want the prophecy to be stopped. We even reintroduce Arlecchino into the mix, and look and behold, the Fatui are actually shown to be doing a good deed by helping with the rescue. Arlecchino tells us about a secret ancient ruin that we go to explore, and Navia joins us. You know, I initially thought that Navia might get closure with Belus and Silver via the Fountain of Lucine, where she might talk to their oceanic spirits, but her meeting them again one last time in the ruins where she nearly dissolves was also really powerful. I thought it was a smart way to give her closure with them, because it helps to establish that even though she had fallen into primordial seawater, there's a slight delay, which is the trial, before she dissolves, and Belus and Silver's last meeting to protect Navia is what gives Neuvillette the small window to rescue Navia. It's really the last time we see Belus and Silver, but their characters were used really well to support Navia's character and motivations. With Neuvillette joining us, we find 3 slates depicting the prophecy. Neuvillette attempts to extract hidden information out of them, but because there is a missing slate, he's unable to get the full picture, which sets in motion another conflict in this act, which is figuring out what the heck does Furina know? Clearly, she knows more than she lets on, and disaster has already struck. People have died, and there's no progress seen even though the Archon claims to not worry about it. We need to get answers. Back in the sewers, Mona makes a surprising appearance. I think this is the first time we've seen her in an Archon quest, which is cool. I think she's mainly here to confirm that the prophecy may extend to all of Teyvat too, because Fontaine has the source of all waters, so danger to that directly impacts Teyvat. Mona will ask her Master B of the Hexenzirkel if she can help us figure out this prophecy, and a few days later, we get contacted not by B, but by N, or Nicole. The same voice that talked to us at the end of Scaramouche's Archon Interlude quest, who mentioned that fate is not so easily changed in Teyvat, which applies here. She brings up some interesting questions like how fate may be able to be changed in places that the gods, who I believe decide fate, may not have their gazes on, which means in places like Conria or the Abyss. I think the message here is that even though fate is generally set in stone, it doesn't have to mean the end of the world. So we know that Fontaine's prophecy will happen in that it will drown and the people will pay for their sins, but we can still move forward despite that, which is what happens in the finale. I also think that this hints more that the Hexenzirkel group's powers and activities may be outside the gaze of Celestia, because Nicole is giving suggestions about fate and how the gods don't have 100% control over it. Trust the process and keep moving forward. This theme is repeated throughout the next few interactions when we ask other characters what they would do if Fontaine were to drown tomorrow. Both Sedendi and Charlotte answer that, well, even though we know tomorrow may not be here, we should still continue with our lives today, because that is living, which I like. Sedendi and Charlotte say that even though tomorrow may be bad, we should still enjoy life today, which I think is a good theme to take away from this. Neuvillette does what Arlecchino did last act, trying to get Furina's information about the prophecy, and just as Furina said to Arlecchino, she also tells Neuvillette the equivalent of, "Trust me bro, I got it handled, don't worry." Well, it's hard to not worry when people literally just died. I justified Arlecchino's demands to Furina, and here, Neuvillette is also justified in demanding information from Furina. It's near impossible to trust Furina's words when people are dying, especially when people are aware that she's been doing her own investigations into the prophecy. She runs away, clearly distraught. To be honest, I relate with Furina here, because even without knowing the truth behind her, it's clear to me that either she's embarrassed that she hasn't made any progress, or that she doesn't want to involve anyone in her burdens, which are very much human traits, and as we later find out, these traits are very fitting for her. So after consulting with Neuvillette, we meet up with most of the Fontaine cast to develop a plan to get Furina to tell the truth. Clorinde uses a metaphor of being hunters that bait Furina into a trap, aka a trial, where she'll have to comply with answering the truth. I think that this plan makes sense, but if I were Neuvillette, I would have desperately demanded Furina for answers and not let her off the hook so easily. I would have liked to put way more effort in demanding the information. Traveler mentioned that we should get her to see how dire the situation is, but I felt that it was pretty clear that she is well aware of the severity of the situation, so that's not the main issue. The main issue is that she's way too stubborn, and especially those closer to her, like Neuvillette, should put in way more effort to get updates from Furina. But anyways, I digress. The plan is set in motion to put Furina on trial, with Navia first having her folks stage a riot against Furina. Furina seeks solitude in Poisson, where we finally see her be vulnerable and guilty. We try consoling her, and just as she's about to tell us and confide in us, we've gotten moved to the Opera House by Linny, where her trial begins. There's a lot that happens in this trial, mainly evidence that contradicts Furina's claim to being the Archon. A lot of it is characterization of her flaws, and I'm already planning a dedicated video analyzing Furina's character, so I'll mainly cover what happened in the trial here in this video. Essentially, Furina's defenses against the accusation aren't enough to satisfy the audience at all, and they pretty much lose complete faith in her. How can she be the Archon when the prophecy has escalated as much as it has? Unsurprisingly, Neuvillette finds her guilty, and the LOREEEEE finds her guilty too. But it still addresses her as the Hydro Archon, which contradicts the accusation that she is not the Archon. Freminet shows up with the missing slate, and Neuvillette pieces together the truth, so I'll summarize it. The previous Archon, Egeria, created the Oceanids, and the Oceanids coveted humans so much that many of them wanted to become human themselves. So, Egeria utilized the power of the primordial sea to turn them into humans. And as we know very well from Rodea about water,
the power of water. is its ability to take any shape.
Creating life angered Celestia, the heavenly principles, because unironically, Egeria, a god, was punished for playing God by creating life, which is a similar theme found in many stories like Frankenstein, where creating life is seen as playing God. The reason that only Fontainians dissolve in primordial seawater is because the power that allows them to be human dilutes itself out back into the sea, and so it reverses the humanoid form back into oceanids. The prophecy is Celestia's punishment to Egeria and Fontaine, basically getting rid of the life created by Egeria and making her weep by herself. This is where fate comes in, because this prophecy is the fate that awaits Fontaine, but how it happens doesn't necessarily matter. There just needs to be a situation where Fontaine drowns, and the Hydra Archon is left weeping by herself, and this is precisely what we get. Because it doesn't matter how the prophecy happens, Focalors set in motion a plan to deceive Celestia, and the plan was Furina. Focalors reveals everything to Neuvillette. She is the Oceanid that Egeria chose to become the next Hydra Archon to resolve the prophecy, because her ideal of justice is to continue the existence of the Oceanid human life that Egeria started, which was Egeria's ideal of justice. To fool Celestia into believing that the prophecy was fulfilled, she removed her divinity from her body, resulting in Furina, who is a human and not a god. She tasked Furina with the role of acting as the Hydra Archon. And even though the end result was successful for Focalors, I still find what she essentially did to Furina to be super cruel. Where Furina's struggles remind me of other stories where basically little girls are tasked with the burdens of roles that they're not prepared to handle, like Beatrice from Re:Zero and Saber from Fate Zero. It's not so black and white. Overall I like the character moments here for everyone involved, but I'll talk more about this in my Furina video. Anyways, because Furina was able to endure 500 years of anguish pretending to be the Hydra Archon, Focalors was able to accumulate enough indemnitium via the Aura Tree, which supplies enough power to create a weapon that can destroy the Divine Throne of the Hydra Archon, which she uses to execute her own life. What this means is that there is no more Hydra Archon, and so therefore, the authority of Hydro is returned to Neuvillette, granting him back his original power as the Hydro Sovereign, the power that Celestia had stolen. This was her way of granting justice to the Hydro Sovereign, and he forgives the sins of Fontainians, basically allowing them to continue as humans without primordial seawater power. And also, Furina, as a result, has completed her task, and she is allowed to live as a human pursuing happiness, which is a good thing. But of course, I don't think that excuses the method, per se. So now that Neuvillette is back at full power, it's time to go kick the ass of the all-devouring Narwhal, which was the cause of Fontaine's rising sea levels. Again, it wasn't planned by Celestia, it just happened to become the one responsible for fulfilling part of the prophecy. It's pretty crazy that even with a full power Hydro Sovereign Neuvillette, he's only able to just contain the primordial seawater power that the Narwhal has, instead of defeating it completely, which speaks to the strength of this Narwhal, as well as the fact that it's just a pet to Skirk's master. I also gotta give a shout out to my man Childe, because his cutscene of using Foul Legacy was really impressive, and we also learned that Foul Legacy is likely named after Skirk's master, the Foul. So Childe uses Foul Legacy, and he's been fighting the Narwhal back, basically having stalled it before it comes to the surface. The fight was pretty sick, and I'm sure he had a great time fighting it. After the Narwhal is defeated, both it and Childe are pretty much yeeted away by Skirk. She tells us some lore, like how her master, Serta Logi, is related to Rhindaughter. Serta Logi sounds like he could be Conrian as well. With the Narwhal using up all its strength, it creates an after effect of Fontaine's sea levels going out of control, which fills the prophecy, because now Fontaine is drowning, and Furina has wept by herself. But because of Neuvillette's help, Fontaine will not dissolve in primordial seawater anymore. The seawater level is controlled, saving Fontaine. And that's basically the conclusion of Fontaine's Archon quest. We do some visits to everyone for some updates, and most people are helping to rebuild the damage from the Narwhal. What's noteworthy is that Neuvillette gave away the Gnosis to Arlecchino, who looks like she was very serious about stopping the prophecy, so I can only imagine she's feeling pretty happy. That said, I'm a little surprised that she didn't really cause conflicts during the Archon quests, since previews implied that she was going to stir up some kind of trouble. But of course, she definitely could have had other intentions, and Hoyoverse can incorporate this into future quests. At the end of the day, she did help against the prophecy, so that's a good thing. And just like how we finished Act 1, we get some nice lore drop from the newly repowered Hydro Sovereign, Neuvillette. Because this authority controls all of Hydro, he gave the Fontaine folks true blood, which is what allows them to live as humans now. Which seems pretty fitting given that part of his character growth was wanting to understand human lives, and here he is now helping them continue to live as humans, which fulfills Ajuria's original wish. Somehow, Childe awakened the Narwhal, and it's unclear whether this is why he was pronounced guilty or if Focalors just wanted him to buy more time fighting it. I think if anything, him fighting with the Narwhal is a huge power boost for himself, since he likely was able to spend lots of time honing his foul legacy form. There's some pretty huge revelations about Gnoses, which are remnants of dead Descenders, as mentioned by Skirk. The Hydro-Gnosis belonged to the third Descender, who's now deceased, and she also implies that she was also born in Teyvat, but just spent her time in the Abyss ever since she was a child. Anyways, because there are 7 Gnoses, this implies that there are at least 8 Descenders, including the Traveler. The Fatui are only aware of 4, and they seem unaware that Gnoses are related to Descenders. It seems possible that the Traveler themselves may become some kind of Gnosis in the future, which is a scary thought. Skirk also calls Gnosis objects of misfortune, which also prompted Neuvillette to give it away. This could be big foreshadowing for when the Tsaritsa gains all 7 Gnoses. She now has 6 of them. And speaking of getting all the Gnoses, the last one is in Natlan, where it's described to be a nation of dragons bent on war. I'm pretty interested in how this works because I want to know how dragons evolved to a point where they coexist with humans, and how come this wasn't brought up in the game before from any characters. Especially because dragons play an important role in Teyvat's history. Additionally, a Pep had mentioned to us that dragons had isolated themselves from humanity. Capitano is also thriving in Natlan's wars, and given that, I'm sure we'll see Childe enjoying the wars when we see him in Natlan. Or he might be busy trying to find Skirk again. He's back in Snezhnaya healing his wounds, but we'll definitely see him again before Snezhnaya. The remaining plot point with Childe is that we gave Arlecchino Childe's vision to return to him, but we haven't figured out exactly why his vision deactivated in the first act. Anyways, that was the lore. I think there are a lot of implications and connections we can make, so lots of food for thought. And that was the finale to Fontaine's Archon quest. If you're like me, you're probably also wondering what the heck happened to Furina. So we'll just have to play through her story quests, which I'll do after this video is out. I thought that this act was a fine conclusion to Fontaine. There was a decent amount of progress done in the world, like Neuvillette having full power again, which I'm sure should awaken Celestia again at some point. If anything, they may awaken during Natlan's Archon quest, but they definitely should be active during Snezhnaya. If anything, these past Archon quests have pretty much confirmed that Celestia taking any action will be during Snezhnaya. But yeah, I've enjoyed Fontaine's story quite a lot. We'll see what happens in the interlude quests with dainsleif and hopefully some more Abyss stuff. Alright, that's it for my all-nighter. Thank you for watching this video, and until next time, take care. Oh dear, run. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Jean, stop. No. Oh my gosh. There's no way that was my fault. There's no way that was my fault.